I thank the Speaker. I'm proud of my Republican colleagues for bringing forward legislation in support of our law enforcement community. I'm proud of the fact that, in fact, this president is trying to focus resources where it'll best provide security and safety on our streets and back our law enforcement community to actually target criminals, not fund ridiculous grants, not fund NGOs that are undermining our security, the very NGOs that are perpetuating the open borders, that are putting gangs in our communities like TDA and MS-13 that lead directly to the death of Americans like Jocelyn Nungare, like Laken Riley, like Rachel Marin, like Kayla Hamilton. Americans that are no longer with us because of the policies of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because of wide open borders and because of tolerance of violent criminals, because of a Democrat president who has let violent criminals out on the street and commuted their sentences, because of radical leftist judges promoted by those that fund my colleagues on the other side of the aisle like George Soros, who have funded DAs that are letting criminals out on the streets in cities like San Antonio and Austin, which I represent. Like my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that have defunded the police time and time again and have defended that position. For example, one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said the defund the police movement is one of the reimagining the current police system to build an entity that does not violate us while relocating funds to invest in community services. Another colleague, the defund movement isn't new. Folks are just finally listening. Defund the police, a Democrat colleague. Quote, defunding the police isn't radical, it's real, a former Democrat colleague. And as I said before, a colleague that literally voted on the Austin City Council to strip $150 million out of the police budget, leaving the Austin police stranded, unable to do their job, and the people of Austin unable to get the services that they deserve and pay taxes for, while their streets are made more violent and while criminals are allowed to roam free under the very aforementioned Soros DAs that refuse to prosecute the criminals. Everybody in America knows what's going on. Everybody in America gets the joke. They saw their cities burning in the summer of 2020. They saw the reality of what happens when you allow these radical Democratic policies to take root. And they want it to end. They want common sense back. They want a president that will enforce the law and an FBI that will target criminals instead of the American people. They don't want to have a federal government that is weaponized against them. They don't want them to be targeted. They want violent criminals off the streets. They want violent gangs off the streets. They want our borders to be secure. They want TDA out. They want MS-13 out. They want fentanyl off of their streets. And the only way you can do that is to actually back up the people trying to enforce the law and actually stand with them in the enforcement of the law and not turn around and let them all out back on the streets. Yet that's what my colleagues perpetually want to do. The fact of the matter is, the American people understand that this president and this Republican House and this Republican Senate and Republican jurisdictions across the country stand for law enforcement. They stand for order. And that's what they want. That's what they sent us here for. Now, we put together some bills this week that are focused on wishes of the people, the men and women in blue, like my grandfather who served as chief of police in Sweetwater, Texas, the many law enforcement I was proud to serve with and alongside in the Office of the Attorney General and in the United States Attorney's Office. We work with them on a regular basis. But when you talk to them, they cannot do their job if the radical leftist policies of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are allowed to continue to be perpetuated. You can't combat crime if you put the criminals back on the streets. You can't combat crime if you import criminals from dangerous prisons. You can't combat crime if your law enforcement agencies are targeting American citizens for political retribution rather than taking dangerous, violent criminals off the streets. I rise in support of these bills. I rise in support of the rule. The legislation that we've put forward will provide value for our men and women in uniform that they've asked for. They've asked for the ability to keep the weapons that they had in service. Now, why does that matter? Well, I'll tell you why it matters. My grandfather that I mentioned before died in 1949 of cancer. When my dad, a 7-year-old, had polio, and my grandmother was a single mom in West Texas raising him, and did all the tough things, didn't ask for any handouts, took 2 jobs, helped my dad go on to be the first to go to college. My dad is still 82 years old. He's still alive. He's 82, still managing to walk, barely. But my dad talks about his dad as a cop, and he pulls out his old .38, the .38 revolver that my grandfather had in service. And that means something to the people that serve. It means something for them to be able to carry that with them and take it with them. It's no small thing. Some of my colleagues dismiss it as being not important. But I can tell you it's important to the people that are out there serving, because they devote their lives to this cause. When I take that .38 out of the safe and I can show it to my son, he's holding the .38 that his great-grandfather held and carried with him when he was policing the streets. And I think that is a good thing. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.